Bars 3.
Some goodbyes are obvious, it's closure you can point to, but others are quiet. They happen gradually, in the spaces between moments, and sometimes you don't even realize you are saying farewell until it's already over. Loss isn't always dramatic. It isn't always a moment you can define. Sometimes it happens so slowly that you don't notice until the absence is the only thing left. Perhaps a relationship that fades into short, awkward conversations. A habit that once felt essential starts to feel distant. A part of yourself, something you thought would always be there, slips away, and you're left wondering when exactly it happened. Elliott Smith's A Fond Farewell is a song about that kind of loss. Not the kind that hits all at once, but the kind that dissolves piece by piece, until all that remains is a haunting memory that plagues you. It's about addiction, about people who drift away, and about the strange emptiness that lingers when you finally need to let go of it. Because sometimes moving on doesn't feel like a victory. Sometimes it just feels like standing in the aftermath of something you can't get back, wondering if you ever really had it in the first place. Elliott Smith was never meant to be a rock star. He didn't have the arrogance, the confidence, or the desire for fame. He wasn't the kind of artist who thrived in the spotlight. If anything, he seemed to shrink away from it. But what he had was something different, something quiet, something brutally honest. He wrote like he was confessing secrets he never meant to share, and his voice carried the weight of a man who had already accepted his own sadness. His music wasn't just sad, it was deeply, painfully personal. Where other artists might have dressed up their sorrow with grand metaphors or dramatic climaxes, Elliott Smith let his pain settle into the background, woven into his melodies with an almost effortless grace. He didn't wail, didn't scream, didn't demand to be heard. He simply existed in his own fragile world, singing in hushed tones, as if speaking too loudly might make everything collapse. More than anything, his songs weren't about wanting to be saved. They weren't cries for help or even acts of rebellion. They were about the kind of pain that doesn't need to be dramatic. It just is. It lingers in the spaces between words, in the soft sighs between verses, in the way his guitar lines felt like an extension of his own isolation. In A Fond Farewell, that pain is everywhere. The opening lines of A Fond Farewell set the stage for the kind of loss Elliott captures so well. Not a sudden rupture, but a slow unraveling. A light bride is meant to create colorful images, something bright and simple, but here it's stripped of color, reduced to black and white, a picture dismantled, a memory that no longer sits right. It's a perfect metaphor for how something once vibrant can be drained of life, whether that's a relationship, a self-image, or a sense of purpose. Pitch burning on a shining sheet carries a violent contrast. Fire consuming something pure, dark ink staining something once clean. It's destruction, but it's not loud, it's slow, inevitable, and then the only maker you want to meet. God, fate, death. Elliott never says, but in the context of everything else, this isn't a song about hope. Then comes the exit. Who will take you out in the open door? Not just who will leave, but who will take you. It suggests an outside force, addiction, death, or maybe just time, pulling people apart as it always does. And finally, the chorus, "This is not my life." Elliott distances himself from what he's singing about, as if he's already a ghost in his own story. But then, it's just a fond farewell to a friend. For a long time, alcohol and nicotine weren't just things I did, they were part of me. They weren't indulgences or vices, they were constants, woven into the routine of my life like background noise. A cigarette after waking up, a drink at the end of the night, small rituals that made everything feel just a little more manageable. It wasn't about addiction, not at first. It was just something to hold on to, something predictable. A moment of silence that felt like control. It didn't matter if I was alone or surrounded by people. I could always count on it. It was the ritual, the slow inhale, the burn in my throat, the way time seemed to soften around the edges. No matter how chaotic or uncertain things felt, this was something I could return to, something I could rely on. At some point, it stopped feeling like a choice, but by then I had convinced myself it didn't matter. I wasn't self-destructive in a way people notice. I wasn't reckless, I wasn't out of control. I was just maintaining something, keeping things steady. I told myself I wasn't like people with real addictions. I had limits, I had boundaries. I wasn't ruining my life. I was just taking the edge off. But looking back, I see how much effort I put into pretending. Addiction doesn't announce itself. It doesn't come crashing in like a storm. It seeps in quietly until one day you realize it's everywhere. It becomes part of your life, a habit that turns into a need. And the worst part is, you don't fight it, you welcome it. Because it's easier than facing what's left when it's gone. It's easier than admitting that maybe, without it, you don't know who you are. At some point, things just started slipping away. The drinking, the smoking, the familiarity of it all. I don't know which one faded first. I just know that one day everything felt quieter. The things I used to reach for without thinking, the things that were just part of my day were suddenly absent. At first, it didn't seem like much, just small things. A cigarette left unlit, a drink untouched, a message typed out but never sent. It happens gradually until one day you notice. Some things disappear without a sound, no clear ending, no final moment, just distance. And when you finally step away from the things that once weighed you down, you expect to feel lighter, but sometimes all you feel is the absence of it. Because it's not just about what you left behind, it's about what was wrapped up in it. The habits, the moments, the people, the way everything used to fit together. And when that's gone, you don't just lose the thing itself. You lose the version of you that existed alongside it, the person you were when they were still there. Maybe that's why it feels so empty, because it wasn't just the drinking, the smoking, it was the late nights that didn't feel so quiet, the familiar name that used to break the silence, the certainty that someone was there. It was the rhythm of it all, the small moments that held everything together, and now without it, there's just this strange, quiet space where something used to be. Everyone talks about quitting like it's supposed to be this big triumphant moment, like once you stop, everything gets better. But nobody tells you about the silence that follows, the strange stillness of it all. At first, you feel like you've won, like you've finally done the right thing. You tell yourself that this is what healing looks like, and for a while it works. But then something shifts. The noise that once filled your life is gone, and all you're left with is yourself. The version of you that was always there, waiting underneath everything else. And that version of you, he's not celebrating, he's just standing there, staring into space, wondering what to do next. I thought getting rid of it would make me feel free. Instead, it just made me feel like I had nothing left. Because addiction isn't just about the substance, it's about the space it fills. It gives you structure, routine, something to hold on to. When it's gone, you start to realize just how much of yourself you had given away to it. What do you do when the thing that got you through the worst days is no longer there? What do you replace it with? Nobody tells you that part. They just tell you to move on, as if moving forward is the same thing as moving on. Elliott Smith never wrote about recovery like it was a fairy tale. He didn't promise happy endings. He didn't write songs about getting better. He wrote songs about what it means to live with yourself when you can't. A fond farewell isn't about overcoming something. It's about knowing that something is already gone. There's no grand declaration, no moment of clarity. There's a quiet acceptance. That maybe some things never really leave you, they just fade into the background. Wish I could say that moving forward made me feel whole again, that I left it all behind and now I feel like myself. But sometimes moving forward just feels like walking through an empty space, trying to figure out what comes next. Because that's the part that no one tells you, that you don't just wake up one day and feel better, that sometimes even after the worst has passed, the absence of it still lingers. You can get rid of the substance, but the version of you that relied on it doesn't just disappear. Maybe a fond farewell isn't about trying to change. Maybe it's just about learning to live with what's left. Maybe it's about knowing that some things will never be what they used to be, that some doors don't open again, that some people leave, and no matter how much you wish you could reach out, you know you never will. But maybe that's okay. Maybe some things are meant to stay in the past. Maybe moving forward isn't about feeling whole again. Maybe it's just about learning to exist in the quiet. Maybe that's enough.